Hello, everyone. I am Jan Blanchard with PCC's Pediatric Consulting Team, and I am here to introduce our next speaker. If you're here for What's Next with PCC eRX, you are in the right spot at the right time to see Morgan Ellixson speak eloquently on this topic, this varied and wide topic. This session is a departure. This one's a little bit longer than the others. So we've got a whole lot of content to get through. We've added an additional hour. Not sure if we'll fill it, but we wanted to be sure that we have lots of time for all the details that Morgan's going to share, as well as your questions. So, as you can tell from my flushed cheeks and my freckles, it is really sunny and warm here in Vermont. So if you see us sneaking sips of water, that's going to be why. Bear with us. I have just a couple of other details to share with you before I turn things over. If you are not already registered, and it's hard to imagine that you're not, but if you haven't joined us yet in the live chat, you can register for that at pcc.com/UC-2020. And that is also the place where you can find recordings and handouts, as well as survey links for all of the sessions we've done already. So please do head there and fill out your surveys, where I know there are more than 8 of you that have been attending these sessions, and that's around the average number of responses that we're getting to the surveys. So if you have ideas you want to share with us, and or reactions, if there are things that you loved, things that you'd like to see us do differently or replace, please head over and put them in a survey there. We'll be sure to gather those up and do a better job all the time. If you are see, I made an edit to this slide after I started sharing and it didn't propagate, so I have an apology to offer to the Coker Group. The exhibit hall now includes a channel for the Coker Group, and if those are folks that you don't know, you might run into Marissa Maldonado or Jeffrey Dagerpont over in that channel, or you may not, but you will definitely run into them if you return here next week for next week's sessions, because they will both be speaking. So please take a look at next week's schedule, which was added yesterday. So if you haven't been back to pcc.com since yesterday, go check it out. See what you want to attend next week. Or let's just all assume you're going to come for all of them, because we want to see you. So now I'm going to turn it over to Morgan. If you saw in the live session, the handouts will be made available a little bit later than for the other sessions, simply because we don't want spoilers. So hunker down, you're going to hear some good stuff. And with that, I will stop sharing. Take it away, Morgan.
All right, thanks, Jan. Oh yeah, I knew my hair was going to look like this, guys. This is great. Let's see, share screen. Okay. All right. Hey everybody, it's Morgan here at PCC. Thank you for joining me for this year's What's Next for PCC eRX, the virtual version. I hope everyone is safe and healthy in your respective locations, and that whether you're in the office or at home, and we do truly wish that you were here with us this year in Vermont, but we'll make the best of it for today's session. So just a couple quick introductions in case we haven't met. I'm Morgan Ellixson-Boyea. I'm the Clinical Applications Project Manager, overseeing pretty much PCC eRX here at PCC. And joining us in the live session is Nat Hayes from the support team. He's the eRX support specialist. So you might speak to him if you ever call in with questions on eRX. He'll be monitoring for comments and questions throughout the session, and then he'll get those over to Jan. And Jan will read those off to us at the end. So even though I can't see your smiling faces, we will hold those questions till the end. We do have a 2-hour session. I'm not sure if we'll end up using it. I did want to allot a big amount of time to be able to answer those questions at the end, because there's a lot of content that I want to share with you today. So what are we going to talk about? Well, lots of things. I want to tell you a little bit about the last year for PCC eRX. We had a lot of things that changed, including the acquisition of the PCC eRX code from FDB and their Meds Tracker team. I want to tell you a little bit about one treasure that's coming in the 8.13 release, which is scheduled for this summer. And then we'll talk about this whopper of a release that's coming in about probably October of this year. That's the Meds Tracker version 9. We'll call it PCC version 9 because it's us now. And then we'll give you a chance to vote on what do you want to see coming in the future. We've got about 15 popular requests, and we want to hear from you about what you'd like to see. And then we'll talk about some commonly asked questions, kind of tips and tricks, but things to make you realize, no, you're not crazy. That's a real thing that happens, and how do you deal with it? So that being said, let's take a look at what's happened in the last year. May of 2019 seems like a really long time ago. It was only a year ago. That was the last time that we deployed an eRX update to our offices. In that update, the first thing that we gave you is RapidRx, and if you don't know necessarily what I mean by that, it's the section off to the side on the right. We kind of get the nice way to recap your prescriptions. You can change the pharmacy. It reads a little bit better, so you know that you're ultimately sending what you intend to the pharmacy. And then there's the really important part where you just click send, and you're able to send one prescription off at a time and not necessarily have to queue everything up. We didn't take away the ability to queue things up. We just kind of jazzed up that screen a little bit. That still exists. The other important change from that May release was changes to AutoCalc. And when I say AutoCalc, I'm really talking about that whack-a-mole syndrome where you enter one thing in a field, you enter something in the second field, the first field blanks out, then you change two more things, then they all change, and you're chasing yourself around on the screen. We tried to get to the bottom of that so that when you're writing prescriptions, you no longer have to kind of rewrite it every time with every field that you're changing. Hopefully we got the majority of cases. If we didn't, you're still seeing those issues, we'd love to hear from you. Send us a note in the chat or email us at support. We'd love to take a look at that and try to get to the bottom of those cases as well. That was, like I said, the last release that we gave to you eRX themed wise in 2019, because directly after that, we announced the acquisition of the FDB MedChecker code base. Huge announcement. Huge project, and that kicked off directly after the users conference last year. So there's lots to be said about that, especially if you're a new client. You may not necessarily appreciate that up until about March of this year, PCC eRX was owned and operated by FDB and their MedTracker team. While it's embedded in the EHR, it was something that was outsourced to them. And we had a unique opportunity last year to purchase that code, bring it in-house, do all sorts of work to make that happen. And what that ultimately means is now this is our code and we get to do what we want with it. Most of MedChecker's customers prior to partnering with PCC were hospital-based. And so you may have noticed there was some wacky stuff that was happening in the system that would make sense if you were doing rounds at the hospital, not so much in outpatient pediatrics. So that's all gonna change. There's a lot of new things that are gonna be coming your way. So let's talk a little bit about what happened. So this is a long list of stuff, but the main goal that I didn't write on this screen is we wanted to make sure that our offices, pretty much you didn't even know this was happening, that there wasn't any interruption to your services at all. In any given week, there's like 40,000 prescriptions that are sent out from all of our offices. There was no way we could just say, time out, let's not send any prescriptions and figure out all this stuff on the list. So we had to do a lot of this in the background to make sure not to interrupt what you need to do every day, and that's take care of patients. So the first one had to do with the way we host eRX. And we'll kind of do last summer versus this summer. So if you think about last summer, when you were using eRX, it was owned by FDB and it was up in the cloud. So you would search for a drug, you send a prescription, think about the basic things you're searching for. That search had to go up into the cloud and then come back down. That's not particularly efficient. And as we discussed how we wanted to host these, we decided instead we should host the eRX environments locally on your server at your office. So when that work was completed in October, some of the immediate feedback we received was that it actually seemed a little bit faster. And probably at this point it's negligible, but that was a nice immediate benefit to purchasing the code. Next up, we had to kind of deal with our SureScripts accounts. And now SureScripts is in charge of pretty much everything having to do with prescriptions, especially if you think about prescriptions leaving your office and going to the pharmacy, they have to go through SureScripts. In order for SureScripts to let you do that, every provider and every location you work at is assigned an identifier. Without that identifier, no go, no prescriptions. So each of you, for every location you work at, have a different identifier. That's fine. You don't really even need to worry about it, but all those identifiers were under the FDB account. So if we didn't move those over when we switched, your prescriptions wouldn't really go anywhere. And we didn't want to have to re-register everybody. So we found a way to migrate those identifiers from the FDB account over to the PCC one. The other important part of this has to do with renewal requests. And so along with that identifier has to do with service levels such as renewals. And we wanted to make sure that those were migrated as well. Because if the pharmacy is sending you a renewal request and it's going nowhere, the patient is without the medications. So that and the next one, ExoStar, were completed in January. ExoStar is the company behind EPCS, a very popular feature that we have, especially in pediatrics with ADHD medications. Once you're used to using it, the last thing you want to do is to go back and have to write paper prescriptions. There are some states that even don't allow that, so really was not negotiable that we couldn't migrate these accounts. We really did not want to have you need to go back through ID proofing again. Nobody likes that. Some people get through it in 15 minutes, some is like 2 weeks. It was just not, we were not going to go there. We had to find a way to migrate those accounts. So between October and then into January, we completed the first 3 things, and you probably necessarily didn't even notice. The next 3 things wrapped up in March. And so there was 3 things there. The first one being a small PCC eRX update. We deployed that through PCC's deployment system, which is a great way to ensure going forward we can give you the updates that we want to share with you. In that update, the markers reviewed button in medication history in PCC eRX, it took a little adventure over to the other side of the component. I don't know why, but we needed to put that back. So we were able to put that back in its rightful home. We also updated the logo in the top left-hand corner. You may not have noticed that, but last summer it said PCC eRX powered by FDB's Meds Tracker. Well, they're no longer with us, so we just needed to be powered by us. So we changed that logo, and that's been updated as well. The next one has to do with drug database and when you're searching for drugs in the system. This one, I think, these next 2, I think, are pretty interesting. Both today, last summer, and in the future, we use FDB's drug data. And so even though we acquired the code, we purchased the code, got everything set up on PCC's own system, we still will continue to outsource the drug data to FDB proper, I guess you could say. Even companies like Epic use FDB's drug data. So it's a great resource, and it's something that we wanted to keep going forward. So we will still partner with them in that aspect. But what that means is previously every month FDB would administer those updates, and now that'll be something taken care of here at PCC. One important point about that, if you think about the drug database, it's lots of stuff. It's when you search for a drug. The next step is really the dosing statements, which is really like sets of directions, right? Then that window pops up. You've got different strengths, different forms, all that stuff. That's coming from FDB. What's also coming from FDB is the safety checking alerts. And so it's one thing when it's duplicate therapy and you're going against 2 drugs in the same class. It's another thing when you're getting those dosing suggestions, such as this dose every 12 hours exceeds the recommended suggestion of twice a day. We at PCC will continue to not have control over some of those nonsensical alerts, but don't give up. I do still want to hear from you about any of these alerts that you're getting that just don't make sense. We want to be able to try to tackle that. We have a direct connection to FDB's editorial team of doctors and pharmacists, and I have no problem bothering them with these concerns. So just send them over, and I'm going to send them right to that team. So PCC can't just rewrite that whole script and make those kind of wacky alerts go away, but I do want to continue to monitor them. Last up is the SureScripts formulary files. Like I said, SureScripts is everywhere, and they also take care of the formulary files for your patients with the pharmacy benefit managers. So when you're searching for a drug and that screen comes up and you're getting the formulary information, that truly comes from a file from SureScripts. Like I said, last summer, that was addressed by FDB and Meds Tracker with the SureScripts file. Instead, PCC had to pull down a rather massive file that now lives here at PCC with the formulary information. the nice part about that is when we pulled down the formulary files, it was totally fresh data. There was a lot of major payers that you probably were seeing some really just kind of crummy results for, and we're hopeful that you're now seeing better results for that. So again, if you still have patients with formulary that just seems like it's not very helpful, reach out. We'd love to keep digging into that. So this has been a really exciting year. It's a really exciting opportunity. I'm always excited about everything, but I think this is a huge opportunity for us, and going forward, this is up to us to decide what we want to do with this tool. I'm incredibly impressed and grateful for the team here at PCC that helped us make this happen, and also made it so that your services were not interrupted at all during that time. Clinical decision-making skills-wise, we still have our partners at FDB with their editorial team. We've got ExoStar, we've got SureScripts. We partnered with this new company called Point of Care Partners. I think they're just really cool dudes, but they rather adeptly take all the State Board of Pharmacy rules and put them in this massive spreadsheet of all this really cool information about, what can PAs and NPs do at a state level, and which drugs end up in weird categories sometimes for schedules, and what's the number of refills you can have on certain drugs. And they've got all that information so that we don't have to read those really, well, I think they're boring, those really boring documents. And they reach out to us all the time, ask us how we're doing, what can they help with. They have sentinel alerts when drugs go off the market, or there's some new state regulation that everybody's got to pay attention to, like all EPCS prescriptions are mandated, next week or something. They're on top of that. So they're a really great partner to have picked up. In addition, we created a PCC eRX provider panel. So that's 8 providers from our community, your colleagues that are joining us to help us think things through when we want to design something new, and make sure it's not just something we think is a good idea, that it makes sense to you as the pediatrician, the person actually writing the prescriptions. So I don't know, this future is us. It's all of us together, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity all around. So what does that really mean for you? Well, PCC's eRX solution no longer needs to be tailored to fit MedTracker's other customers, because like I said, there was a lot of hospital-based platforms, and Dewey and his team were great, and we'd give them this list and say, look at all these things our clients want. And if it didn't necessarily fit what the other customers might need or their workflows, a lot of times that's why we weren't getting all the things that we wanted. We don't have to worry about that anymore. This is about you guys. So PCC's clients truly are the driving force behind all new development. And we're going to vote a little bit later about what you might like to see going forward. I have to show you all the cool things that are coming, and then you can make that decision. So there's a lot to cover here today. Okay, so I'm going to talk a ton today about the version 9 release that's coming in October. Tons of stuff in that release. There is a little treasure coming your way as soon as summer 2020. I think it's going to be in June, and it's eRX related. So very popular request, long-standing request, has to do with being able to mark as reviewed not only medications, but prescription or allergies to medications in PCC EHR. So we're now giving you the basic functionality to do so. I say basic because there's some caveats to that, but if you think about the other chart-wide components that you typically walk through the visit with and mark as reviewed, so that's in the chart note, you can now do that for your eRX allergies and your medication history. Now, you can do that in the EHR, but you can still do that in eRX, and that's where the interesting part is, and we'll talk more about this when this release comes, but those two statuses of the time stamps aren't necessarily going to communicate with each other. Going forward, that'd be something we'd love to integrate, but right now we have a lot of infrastructure things we want to do. We want to pull all sorts of stuff into the EHR, and in order to get this switched to you now, this is kind of what we ended up with. So I think this is going to be a huge win for those of you that like to mark this as reviewed, so that's just saved in that chart note for the future, so you know what the patient's allergies were and the medications at the time. If your workflow is to review these over an eRX, you're welcome to continue doing that as well. So that's a pretty cool little treat that you got coming sooner than version 9. So what's next? Well, a ton of stuff. I'm going to tell you the next probably at least half an hour about all sorts of things that are coming in version 9. I picked Well, I said I was going to do the top 20. There's 21, but no one was really going to count. I probably didn't have to tell you that. There's going to be about 20 cool new features that I want to get you excited about today. Plenty more stuff coming as well in that release. What I want to be really clear about, this release that I'm about to tell you about, PCC did not code this. We didn't design it. We didn't develop it, any of that stuff. I don't want to take credit for this. This is the last release that our team at MedTracker created for us before we parted ways. Largely what's in this release is things that our clients have asked for. It was kind of, if you ever met Dewey at one of the users conference, he had a real soft spot for PCC. And so these were things that he wanted to give us, before he left MedTracker. So some really cool stuff coming up. But after this release, it's not going to be nearly this big. So everybody's going to be really pumped about what's in this release. And then what comes after that is probably going to be like a little bit. So think about this as like a waterfall of stuff. And then the future is going to be more like a little river of PCC eRX things. We've got plenty to work on. That's what we're going to help you weigh in your vote on what you'd like. But I just want to make this clear. This is going to be a whopper of a release, and then we're going to take it kind of slow after that. So for shorthand, I'm going to call this a version 9 update. Really, this will be PCC EHR 9.0. This will be after the 8.13 release, and we're aiming to get this out in October. We know with everything that's going on in the world, things could change. And so we'll just stay tuned. We'll give you updates, plenty of web labs and trainings the closer that we get to this. Okay, so there is tons of stuff in this release. Some things are mandated by the government or SureScripts, but don't worry, I think everything in here you're gonna be really happy about. I'm just gonna go through these categories super fast. ARA updates, it's the promoting interoperability stuff. There's some cool things in there that ARA says we need to have, and I'm pretty excited about these ones. PHP is the code behind the scenes for eRX that just needs an update. The NCPDP script standard is something through SureScripts, and you write your prescription in regular words, right, on the screen. And in order for it to get to the pharmacy, SureScripts dictates a standard that everything kind of gets filled into little boxes and zooms off through the internet. So that standard's being updated, but there's some cool benefits to that update that you'll be able to take advantage of. Got a whole category of eRX delighters. That's just stuff you've asked for. A couple things you didn't even know you wanted that I think you'll like. Industry quality improvement, just making things safer for you when you're sending prescriptions. As far as kind of naming conventions, there's going to be a huge update to kind of when you're searching for methylphenidate and you really mean, the brand name this, it's going to be in parentheses in a much better way. I think you'll be really pleased with that one. We've got some improvements for our support team so that our support team can better support PCC eRX and then in turn support you better as well. And then Douglas and his great team will have to write a whole bunch of new educational content and also go back and update a lot of the things that already existed on the internet. So let's take a look at some of these. The ARA updates, there's 3 major things with the ARA updates. There's RX cancel, RX change, and RX fill. So everyone loves this screen. You've just written a prescription, sent it off to the pharmacy, and you changed your mind, or the family changed their mind, it's the wrong pharmacy. You go ahead and discontinue that, and then you get this pesky warning that you've got to call the pharmacy. You're busy. You don't actually want to call the pharmacy about this at all. I have great news for you. With the new release, you're instead going to see this message. So an electronic cancellation will actually be sent in this case on your behalf over to the pharmacy, so you no longer have to call the pharmacy. That being said, we're probably going to be ahead of the game for some pharmacies. So you'll have this capability to cancel these prescriptions electronically. It doesn't mean the pharmacies are going to be ready. So you'll have to watch out, you'll get the hang of the messages, but you'll want to read that message, especially if the pharmacy is not able to accept that message. You're going to see the top message instead, and then you really will want to have someone call and take care of that. The other thing that this pertains to is medications and medication history. And that might have not made a whole lot of sense why, you're doing medication reconciliation, you're cleaning up your patient's chart, you decide that this medication is no longer relevant for your patient, or maybe they said they're not taking it. You discontinue it, and then you get this pop-up saying you got to cancel it. And you're like, that doesn't make much sense. That's because think about a prescription for 1 month with 5 refills. That's 6 months worth of medications. If you were to cancel that treatment anywhere in between that and not call the pharmacy, that means that they still have refills available. And I'll tell you from the pharmacy perspective, the number of people that come to the counter and say, just fill everything on my profile is astounding. And they might forget you told them not to take it, or they just innocently refill something you truly don't want them to take. So for now, between now and when you get this release, that message does, it is appropriate to call, I think, for stuff that you're cleaning up from med history. So eRX cancel is a new service level, kind of like renewal requests, only you don't have to enable this. This will come on by default for you, so you don't have to worry about setting this up. Just go ahead and cancel those prescriptions, and those will be electronically sent over to the pharmacy. Okay, eRX change. I really like this one. This is going to come into the eRX task queue a lot like your renewal requests. And so imagine you just send a prescription over to the pharmacy for DAW, some brand name drug, right? You want them to dispense it as written, don't substitute generically. Well, turns out the patient's insurance doesn't cover it. And today the pharmacist would have to call you and have a conversation with you or your staff about what do you want to do about this. And instead, with eRX change, they can send an electronic message with that same information. So this will come in on the eRX task queue, much like the renewal requests, with some suggestions for you. And in this case, I wrote for Intuitive ER, the insurance isn't going to pay for it. So the message from the pharmacy staff is that, well, we could do the generic, that's covered, please consider this. You're the clinician, you make the decision. You might want them to do the original prescription. You might say, all right, I'll fill out a prior authorization, or the patient said they'd pay cash. I don't know. You have every opportunity to say, keep the original one. You could also accept their suggested prescription instead. This could also, like I said, have to do with prior authorizations. There might just simply be a therapeutic equivalent. Think about ranitidine, something like that. If you wrote for that, the pharmacy staff might write back and say, well, yeah, I don't know. You might want to do something different here. So these are up to you as a clinician to approve or deny. But I think it's going to save you the phone call there. Much like renewal requests, this is something you can decide if you want to participate in. So this is in PCC EHR user admin. You can decide if you want to have this turned on or not. So this will deploy off. We'll remind you of all this when we get closer. And you can decide if you want to see the eRX change request. Keep in mind, like everything I'm talking about in this section, the pharmacies may not be participating yet, so you may only see them from, I don't know, Walgreens, CVS, and not necessarily from the smaller pharmacies. Okay, the last one has to do with eRX fill information. So you write a prescription, goes off to the pharmacy, and you can tell when you wrote it, you can tell when it got there. You don't really know much of what happens after that. eRX fill is going to kind of hopefully fill that gap where you'll find out some information about when your patient actually picked that up. Again, if the pharmacy is participating, you will see eRX fill information in prescription history. It's this little like pill bottle that looks like they're pouring things into it. And when you click on that, you'll see a history of what was filled for that medication. So we'll see, in early April and then in May, this was filled. And if you're considering whether it's appropriate for a refill, you might say, all right, yeah, it's about that time to make a new prescription for this. And then furthermore, they're kind of really light gray, but there's this little like flippy triangle, and you can click that and it'll just tell you about the original prescription that was written. You can look easily at the number of refills and stuff like that. It's really cool information. If you're familiar with partial refills, say you send a prescription for 30 days and they legitimately only have 5 tablets, you would see that information reflected here as well. So if the family calls and says, for some reason I'm out already, you could be able to tell, well, it looks like you only picked up 5. You should contact the pharmacy for the other 25. So even though the government said we had to do these ones, I think these ones are pretty cool. And eRX fill will be on by default because it's kind of innocuous. It's not in your way. You don't have to address it or approve anything. That information will just be available to you should you want to reference it. Okay. Oh boy. All right. Prescriber delighters. And as I should have mentioned this earlier, anything you want to comment on, questions on this, please just send us notes in the chat. I'd love to see your feedback later on some of these new features. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in this prescribers delighters section that specifically PCC's clients have asked for. This first one, I don't think anyone's asked for. This is probably my favorite. I don't know if I'm allowed to pick a favorite, but I think you guys will really enjoy this one. You know, when you need to write 90 days worth of an ADHD med, and you can't necessarily because there's rules, and you have to write 3 30-day prescriptions, right? So you pick the first one for concern. It's 30 days. We'll start it today. Okay, then you got to write a second one, and you pick that. You get a duplicate therapy alert. You got to approve that. Okay, now you're going to do the third one. You get another duplicate therapy alert. Okay, so now you created 3 prescriptions. They're all the same date. You have to go in and change the bottom 2 so they're 30 and 60 days away. Then you have to go to another screen to send them. Well, I'm here to tell you, gone are those days, because in the new release, this is in the, think about the edit prescriptions window. This is a new little section, this button that I've highlighted in orange. This is pretty much only going to apply for ADHD medications, but you simply click create 3-month supply and hold on to your hats, because now what this does is over here on the left is it populates all 3 dates. Pretend that these are screenshots from last year, but it would default to today's date and then logically 30 and 60 days from now. You might say, well, I don't want to start it today. That's fine, but you can change them all on this screen without having to worry about it. Ignore those 2 things. I'm spoiling my own surprises. Don't look at those 2 things underneath those dates there. We'll get to those. But over on the right-hand side, you'll see that now you've got Adderall in this case. You've got all 3 prescriptions. You're sending out 3 prescriptions at once. All you have to do is hit process now. And if you're lucky, you've only had to do 1 duplicate therapy alert, and that's against the Adderall the patient's already on, not in between each one of these prescriptions. So I should have counted the number of clicks that this saves. It's got to be like 5 or 6 of them, especially if you don't need to change the date. So I think, like I said, I think this one's probably my favorite. If you're not using EPCS to send prescriptions electronically, please give us a call. We can get you set up with that. Oh, I got an update to my Flash player. That's nice. We don't need that right now. All right, we're back at it again. Okay. All right, so let's see. What else do I got here? Oh, favorites. Okay. So we have had a lot of feedback about favorites over the years. Most of it, I'm with you. Favorites in Dr. First, I think, were something that people actually liked, even though a lot of Dr. First was kind of rough. And I think we kind of missed the mark on favorites, to be totally honest. With FDB, there was a lot of things that were meant to work, like the automatic favorites, where it's remembering things that you're prescribing. That whole tiled section is kind of unpredictable, right? Between 2 different days, you don't know what's there. What I want to point out before I show you the 2 things that we're adding is that the underlying fundamental way that favorites works is not changing. You still have the 2 options for manual and automatic. You'll still see that whole screen with like the thumbs up, thumbs down, where you control what favorites are there. You'll still have that tiled section. It's still going to be probably unpredictable, to be honest. You'll still have where you search, like you've got a whole bunch of amoxicillin favorites. You don't know what they are, but you search for the drug name amoxicillin, you'll see your favorites there. That's all going to stay the same. What we're doing is adding 2 brand new functionalities, things that you guys have always asked for, that are going to kind of supplement the way favorites are today, that I think are going to greatly reduce frustrations with the way favorites are working. Some people have totally adapted to them, and others, it's still been a little bit of a struggle. So I'm hopeful that these next 2 things are really going to be crowd pleasers. So the first thing people would say is, just show me a list of all of my favorites. I don't know why I can't see all of my favorites at the same time, especially with the way that tiled section works. So now, there's this drop down right in the favorite section of all of your favorites. And so this is every existing favorite that you have that's kind of in the active section. There's a separate section at the bottom. We'll cover that closer to when this feature is going to go out. But this is going to be everything that you have in your favorites. So not only is it a list, but you can also take actions off of it. So if I was to click the colace, that would populate a prescription just like it would if I selected it from the tiled section. This is going to be pretty cool. The other thing you should know is right behind that drop down, the tiled section still exists. So if you are doing fine with that section, you're welcome to keep that. So these are the 2 options you'll now have. You can turn either one of these on or off. Again, I'll remind you when it's closer to when this is getting deployed, but the favorites drop down will go off, will be deployed off. So you'll have to choose to turn that on. Some of you have like 900 favorites. You may have started with automatic favorites back in the day in 2017. And honestly, it's pretty difficult sometimes to clean those up. Give us a call. Take a look before this goes out. If you think you have tons of favorites in there, what I guess what I'm getting at, you don't want this drop down to be full of 900 favorites you don't care about, right? So let's try to take the time now to get those cleaned up. We can help you just start over from scratch if you want, because there's a much easier way to create a favorite coming on my next slide that maybe you want to just start over. We can clear them the week before this goes out, whatever you want to do. So next up is one button add to favorites. This has been like the most popular favorites request since day one, pretty much. You're in the room with the patient, you create this prescription, you're like, wow, this is just the best prescription I've ever created, and you want to save that. Well, you didn't have a way to do that until this release. So now you'll have this cute little heart over here near the drug name. It's gray if it's not a favorite. It'll turn, when you click it, it'll turn blue. It's kind of like Instagram. And then we also have this like text-based button down here at the bottom for add to favorites. You can use either one of those. If you already have something listed as a favorite and you summon it from your list, when this pops open, that heart will be blue. This add to favorites will be grayed out to trigger to you that's already a favorite, so you don't try to save it again. So like I said, if you want to start over with your favorites, you could easily, over the course of a week, generate your favorites just based on the stuff you're writing all the time. So I hope that you guys are excited about this one, because I can't see your faces, but I know this has been a crowd pleaser. Okay, what else we got? Oh, all right, so sending prescriptions faster. We get a lot of feedback about how long it actually takes to send a prescription. You have stuff to do. You don't want to have to sit around and wait for these things to process. And with the next release, there's going to be 3 different things. The first one, finalizing prescriptions, remove delay after sign and send. What am I even talking about? When, we'll talk about this in the tips and tricks section, but when you're on that final prescription review screen, you hit send, and you might notice it's doing some swirly stuff on the side, and you close that window. That's actually a bad idea, because that window is supposed to close on its own when the prescriptions are done sending. Ultimately, that window is supposed to stay open to give you feedback directly from SureScripts if there's an issue with your transmission only. You hardly ever get issues, and that window just closes. A lot of people close that window. I don't blame you, but that's a lot of times why your prescriptions then back up on your queue when you thought you already sent them. So all that being said, what will happen in the new release is you'll click send, that window's going to close. And the transmission stuff will happen in the background, and we're not going to force you as the user to wait to find out if there's a problem with SureScripts. We'll tell you if there's a problem with SureScripts. So you'll hit send, you walk away and do the next thing. So that alone is going to save several seconds, sometimes like 30 seconds, depending on your internet connection. The other thing, because you aren't going to see the immediate feedback from SureScripts, there's better error handling before you even send the prescription. So for example, in this screenshot here, time-based units aren't allowed through SureScripts. And what I mean by that is 30 tablets is fine, 7 days is not. So days, weeks, and months, actually, SureScripts doesn't like that. It's not really a quantifiable amount. Pharmacists can figure it out, but really you want to tell them exactly how much you want, you tell a patient to take it for 7 days. You don't measure it in 7 days. So think about days, weeks, and months for more like speech therapy, occupational therapy prescriptions. That one makes a little bit more sense because those don't go through SureScripts. The last one is prescription character count is being increased from 140 to 1,000. So if you're creating prescriptions for tapers or just really complex directions, you might spend all this time creating this, and then you don't really have a prompt to even tell you that you've gone over 140, and then you've got to start over and try to use shorthand for certain things. That's now going to be 1,000, so I think that that's going to be plenty for those prescriptions going forward. Next up, let's talk about renewal requests a little bit. Renewal requests can be kind of controversial depending on the office. Some offices just do not want renewal requests coming in from the pharmacies. In theory, renewal requests should be the patient went to the window and they said, I'd like a refill. Pharmacy staff says, you don't have one. Would you like me to contact your doctor? But there's some pharmacies that just put people on these auto refills and you're constantly getting inundated with renewal requests. And the patient is like, I didn't even ask for that. So maybe with these updates I'm about to tell you about, you might decide instead renewal requests, maybe they're not so bad. So for renewal requests, a couple different things. You might have a whole pile of renewal requests waiting on your queue for some that really need to go to somebody else. Maybe I'm on vacation for a whole month and my renewal requests are piling up. One of my colleagues could go in and easily approve them, but if they're not on my queue, my queue is filtered to my name, and if they're not on my queue, I'm not watching your stuff. So you or your office staff could easily reassign those renewal requests to somebody else. So in this case, I want to give Dr. Canning something to do, so I could reassign all of my renewal requests to him instead. And those would move from off of my queue onto John's queue, and he can deal with those whenever he wants to. Next up is multiple requests. This is everyone's favorite. You don't answer them in one day, and then they send you a new request today and tomorrow and the next day. And when you finally get a chance to address these, you might approve the first one. You might deny all of them, but the point is you have to address them each individually, and that's definitely frustrating. Instead, with the new release, you'll see here in this example, these are going to kind of join up into a little group. And so there's been 3 requests for this oral contraceptive, but instead it's 1 request. You can see how many times they've asked you for it. You can approve this and it's going to take care of all 3. Deny it, same thing, takes care of all 3 of them. This one isn't as exciting, but today in the system, you might receive a renewal request for a medication and it's not quite right. You know, maybe it's an albuterol and you want to change the way the patient's taking it a little bit, change the number of refills, something like that. You had an option for deny new prescription to follow. That's simply called replace in the new system, and it looks very familiar to the old screen. It brings up the same exact drug, everything that was pertaining to the original renewal request. You can change just little bits about it or start over and pick a brand new drug. This last one, renewals will not display into prescription history until approved. It doesn't sound very interesting, but what will happen today is renewal requests, they're waiting on the queue, but they're also hiding out in prescription history as a pending prescription. And you might not even notice it unless you've seen this pesky thing where it makes it sound like it was written in 1970. And that's some funny talk for the way computers think when they don't know what date it's supposed to be. So they just put this date instead. We are under the impression that if we don't show these until they've been approved, this should hopefully alleviate the 1970 issue. You're not going to get this update till later this year. I'll remind you again, but when we get there, we'd love to hear from you after that if you are still seeing the 1970 issues so that we can keep track of those. Just a couple more things for renewals. Oftentimes I'll talk to clinicians, and one of the reasons they turn renewals off is because there's certain drugs they just don't want to see renewal requests for. Oftentimes I've heard, and this is going to be kind of the opposite example, they might say, I only want to do them for oral contraceptives. Everybody else I want to see for a visit. So you could, on a per patient, per medication basis, prevent renewal requests from coming in for that medication at all. Right now, like I said, this is per patient, per medication. In the future, there's a wish out there that maybe by default, every time I pull up this specific drug, make sure I can't get a renewal request for this, or even like a whole class of drugs. Like I said, maybe you want to block out everything but a couple different drug classes. But for right now, to make this a little bit easier, especially even if you are using renewals, you can block certain renewal requests from coming in on a per patient, per medication basis. Also, maybe I am filling in for Dr. Canning this week. I'm going to help write his prescriptions for his patients while he's out. But what I don't want to deal with is his renewal request next month for this patient. Sure, I've got this new reassign feature, but I also can prevent that renewal from even coming in addressed to me. So I could say, I'm covering for him today, but if you want to follow up, please call Dr. Canning instead. So those 2 options will be present for every prescription that goes out going forward. Okay, oh, good, got some cool stuff coming for the RX task queue. This is mostly pertaining to pending prescriptions. So think about a pending prescription as something that maybe your nursing staff prepared for you that you need to send off to the pharmacy. Maybe you queued it up yourself and you just haven't had a chance to process it, but it's the things on the eRX task queue that haven't yet gone to the pharmacy, so the patient's still waiting for this medication. Today, if you were to look at your pending prescriptions, you might see something that you want to change a little bit about, right? You don't have any way to edit that prescription. You might see something just straight up, you just want to delete it. You don't have a way to do that. You might have 10 different patients on the queue. They each got 3 prescriptions. You can't select all those patients and send them all at one time. You have to do each patient individually all 10 times until version 9. So, yes, now we have a whole bunch of new buttons. There's a lot going on this screen, but you can edit prescriptions, pending prescriptions right from the eRX task queue. It's that same red edit pencil. So you open that back up, make some changes if you want. You can send that right from there. Maybe you just don't want to send that Keflex, just delete it. That's fine. You'll have an option to do that. And probably the most exciting out of this group is, it's off the screenshot here, but you can select everything and just send it all at the same time. So you can decide if you want to send them all electronically, send some print. You can really do whatever you want. Select all doesn't mean you have to send everything. You can select all and then delete some. You can remove some of them. So instead of having to send them all individually, now you can do a whole bunch all at the same time. Kind of in that same idea of making things easier to delete and edit are some changes to medication history. So I hear from offices all the time, medication histories for patients can be really unwieldy. It's not even oftentimes a complex patient. There's just tons of stuff in there. There's no real logical way to you as the user on how to discontinue something. And once you even figure it out, if you've got 20 things you need to delete, you could be there a long time just trying to do the med recon stuff, and you got the patients in the room. So I think the changes I'm about to show you should hopefully encourage you and your staff to go in and dig in and clean up some of these complex charts when you've got the time. So this is the future of medication history. It looks almost identical to what I was just showing you. The only way to delete something before was to click the red edit pencil, click the discontinue button, and then answer those questions there. Now you simply just have a delete button that you can delete individual entries. Again, it's not in this screenshot, but there's a new button that says clean up med history. You click that, and there'll be a little checkbox next to every entry that's there, and you can select all, select whatever you want, and discontinue them in a big batch. So hopefully that will help you be able to clean up your list pretty quick. The last one is improvements to retail pharmacy history when you're importing stuff. Retail pharmacy history is really cool information a lot of times, and you might see something on that list that you truly do want to import onto your patient's list. So you click this one medication, and it's 20 milligrams twice a day. You click the next page, and then it says, what strength and what frequency do you want? And you're like, well, I don't know, it was just there, and you got to go back and look at it again. It seems very logical that that information would travel with you to the next screen. So there's been some improvements in the logic and what it's matching up to that's hopefully going to improve that for you when you're matching things in from prescription history or retail pharmacy history. That, I think, is the last one that I wanted to tell you about in version 9. Tons of stuff coming. I covered like 50% of it. Some stuff's in the background. Like I said, it's for the support team to make things easier for you, and some technical things, but tons of really good stuff coming. And our hope is to get this out to you in October and a little bit earlier if you're going to participate in beta testing. So what's really next? Well, we got that release coming in October. Like I said, huge release, and what's going to come after that is going to be a lot slower. We didn't write that big bunch of really cool enhancements, and we're going to pick some smaller things to work on. I'll be the first to say there's tons of buggy stuff, right? We have lots of things that aren't working necessarily the way we want them to, so we'd like to start tackling those too. What we do want, though, is to hear from you as the people using the e-prescribing platform. What would you like to see? If you could wave this magic wand and you got to pick, what would you like to see us work on next? So no promises, first of all, just because you pick it, that we're going to be able to work on it. But I'm going to show you our top 15 popular enhancement requests. And that's going to send out a link in the live support or in the live session channel for you to vote on what you want. I know it's going to be really exciting. I would recommend that you wait until the end before you hit submit. If you check something, you can uncheck it as we go through the list. It's a pretty quick list, but that'll give us a good idea of what you as the user want to see. And so this is all stuff that's not in this, this release that we just covered. If you've been to these sessions before, this used to be the top 20. We got so many things from the top 20 that now I don't have a lot of stuff left for really popular wishes. So at the bottom of the little forum, there's a spot to say, what else do you want to see? So you could tell me about a bug that you're experiencing or just something, a cool idea that you've thought of too. So I'm going to hope that Nat sent out that thing. All right, Jan's giving me the yes. All right, so let's look at these top 15 enhancement requests. Okay, so I kept this first one on here, tune favorites to work better for PCC's pediatricians, because I pointed out some things. We're giving you the one button add to favorites, we're giving you the drop down, but there is some other fundamental stuff here that could use a little love. So I left that on there. If what I've outlined today still doesn't hit the mark for what you'd like to see for favorites, you can go ahead and vote for that one. Kind of to follow that one up as a separate wish to allow me to determine which favorites display in that tiled section again, because it is a little unpredictable. A couple pharmacy themed ones. When you add a new pharmacy, let that default pharmacy be across all siblings. If mom's going to take kid one to Walgreens, I don't think they're going to go to CVS for the other one, but right now you do have to add those pharmacies separately. When you add a new pharmacy, give me a choice of what the default pharmacy should be. People are 50-50 on this one. They're like, of course, if I just search for this new pharmacy that I want it to be the default. And then some say, oh no, that's just the backup pharmacy in case. And so I think users would like to be able to maybe be prompted. Maybe it's a configuration per practice. This is a really popular request the support team gets a lot, is allow my office to change what visit or encounter a prescription's been attached to. I see this all the time. You might be in the visit from 6 months ago, looking at what happened with the patient's that visit, and you're looking at the prescriptions. You're just getting an idea of what's going to happen in today's visit. And then, oops, you write a prescription under the visit from 6 months ago. It's harmless to an extent. The prescription still goes to the pharmacy. It's still in the eRX chart, but really, if you were to go back at today's visit, you wouldn't see that prescription. So sometimes that'll happen, and we'll get a call asking us to move that. So that would be the wish, to be able to do that on your own. Next up is to integrate a state-specific query for controlled substances right into eRX. That has to do with your PDMP, your prescription drug monitoring program. I think at this point every state has one, but they don't make it easy. All the rules are different. Sometimes you just have to log in and prove you did that. Sometimes you have to document that you prescribed something. Sometimes the pharmacy staff has to document that they dispensed it. But make this easier for you to do that work without having to go to an outside source to make that happen. This one's going to become more popular as the years go on. Add electronic prior authorization right into PCC EHR. So maybe prompt me before I even send it that I need a prior authorization so I can do that work, or change my mind and maybe prescribe something else. The next two have to do with provider agents and clinical staff. So think kind of about your nursing staff in general. In Dr. First, you could designate as a provider what nursing staff you want to be able to write your prescriptions. And with our system today, especially think about like a 10 location practice, every provider agent can write for every doctor. And so someone in a completely different office could technically, I don't think they would do this, but they could technically write a prescription for you even though you don't work directly with them. So prescribers sometimes say, I'd like to just keep my list down to a couple people that I work directly with, and that way there's no errors made. Same thing with provider agents and clinical staff for favorites. They have the ability to create favorites in their My Settings tool, but it's all for naught, because when they're prescribing for you and they see your favorites. But some nursing staff has expressed that they'd like to be able to see their own favorites. Maybe there's some kind of verbal order stuff that they're used to being able to set, and they want to be able to see those quickly. Another popular request is allowing prescribers to create handwritten prescriptions as needed. There's plenty of times where you're not in the office and you need to write something or call it in, and you want to be able to go back and document that. And there's not a really straightforward way to do that today. All right, so improved weight-based dosing functionality in PCC eRX is not intuitive. I think people do struggle sometimes with weight-based dosing. once I've had a chance to explain what it's doing, there's some weird, that there's per dose and per day, and when you pick the statements, it's all being converted. The math is all very accurate. It's just sometimes what you're expecting to happen, if you're not necessarily familiar with how it works, can be a different experience. And so you shouldn't have to talk to me to understand how to use the tool to do your weight-based dosing that you could do on your calculator. So make it so it's more intuitive. You don't have to have a conversation, and that it's really clear when you get in there what it's doing. So this next one, when you approve or deny a renewal request or a refill request in PCC eRX, it shows in prescription history, it shows in medication history that you did it, but it doesn't have that nice little home over on the EHR side where it's living at the bottom of your encounter, because there's no renewal request encounter. It's not related to a visit. It's not related to a phone note or a portal message. So maybe give us a renewal request encounter or something so that you can see, hey, I did deny that last week, kind of thing. This next one I think will become more popular the more people are using patient portals and stuff like that, to be able to mark certain medications as confidential to control where they display. Oral contraceptives and other infection treatments that might be more confidential and something you don't want necessarily the parents to see. This next one has, again, this is for the nursing staff, improve the ordering provider logic when you're prescribing something. This one's a little interesting to explain, but if I'm a nurse and let's say I work with the same doctor all day, and I go into the, I go to the room right after you, and I'm doing the med reconciliation and I'm preparing the prescriptions and sending them out, it might make sense that my ordering provider is sticky, right? I'm working with the same person all day, so I don't have to re-enter it every time. Doesn't work so well for the triage nurses. And so they get a phone call for Dr. A, they send it out, then they get a phone call about a patient that is the primary care person for patient B, and they go to write that prescription. Well, it's got the provider A's name in that field. They've got to manually change that. And then there's some other stuff too, where you start renewing from the last person that wrote it. It's not working well. People have adapted to it, I think, but there's got to be a better way to do that. So we'd like to be able to make that improvement for our nursing staff. And this last one's a really wordy way to talk about how do we deal with things when drugs go off the market. And it's not even going off the market necessarily. If you think about poor albuterol, it seems like every other month in the drug database, there's something very slight that gets changed about the name of it, right? And so last month, it has this very specific name, and that is a code in the background, like 123. And then next month they changed this little bit about the name, and well, they can't use the same code anymore. It's got to be 456. That sounds fine, except all the historic stuff on your patient's chart and in your favorites, if it's hanging out with the old one under 123, you're going to try to process it and send it to the pharmacy, and there's problems with it. It won't go out electronically. There's asynchronous errors. If you search for a brand new drug, which you should do, if you're having trouble with anything like that, just search for a brand new drug and you're going to pick up the new entry. But you shouldn't have to do that in the first place. So that's real logical. When all you do is change a little bit about the name for albuterol, we should be able to map that for you. If a drug truly goes off the market, maybe that was the brand and there's still a generic. We don't want to just say, okay, well, you should take this other drug from the class instead. But there's got to be a different way to deal with this so that you as the user aren't presented with the error and the problem. Make it our problem, when something goes off the market. So those are our top 15 known enhancement requests. You might have already picked your top 3, but if you haven't, I would take the time now to submit your vote for your top 3. And there's a spot at the bottom if you want to give us any other suggestions. We'd love to hear from those as well. And you don't have to do that right now. You can always do that later today or at the end of this session as well. Okay, last section has to do with tips and tricks, kind of commonly asked questions. Again, the stuff that you're not crazy, that's really a thing. And here's some of these are suggestions, and some of these we're going to kind of talk a little bit about a bug that we know is occurring today in production. Okay, so if you have been to a previous users conference, some of these you will have seen before, but there are some new ones mixed in here. So this would be particularly important, especially for our newer clients in the last year or so. So kind of a question you've asked yourself, wait, I thought I sent this prescription already. We touched on this earlier. When you hit send prescriptions and this window has not closed, you really need to wait it out and wait for that window to close. If you close this window yourself, you're potentially interrupting the transmission of the prescriptions to the pharmacy, and that's why they end up back on your queue again, even though you thought you already sent them. You might be a habitual closer of this window and you've never had that problem. You're kind of lucking out. I would definitely, this window is intended today to stay open until the transmission is successful. And in the future release, you won't have to deal with it anymore. This window will close on its own. Okay, common question, where's my swish? When I say swish, I'm talking about the little blue arrow on the far left-hand side. That's an easy way to renew anything from your prescription history. So let's say the patient's back in 6 months later. I really want to do this Medrol dose pack. I don't want to have to rewrite it. I don't want to search for it. I can hit that swish and that creates a prescription right there. But if we're talking about the ofloxacin, you'll see there is no swish, right? And you're like, what the heck's going on here? That is because you're in the encounter in which you originally wrote that medication, which makes sense. You're not necessarily going to renew something that you wrote today, because in theory, you're really only in that chart for today's visit, right? But again, from earlier, you could be looking at the visit from 6 months ago for any number of reasons. And if you try to renew that ofloxacin, it's not going to be there with the swish. So it's always in your best interest to be in the fresh encounter, today's visit, portal message, whatever. And at that point, you'll see swishes for everything as long as you didn't already write it today. Okay, so we get this one a lot, and they're like, man, my RX task queue never loads. So if your RX task queue takes too long to load, the first thing I ask people to do is look at that number in the little RX task queue. If that's 99 plus, you're already in the danger zone. You shouldn't have that many things on your RX task queue. You can see over on the far right-hand side tasks, and you'll see this one's not too bad, it's just 158, but I see some that are upwards of 1,000 entries on the RX task queue. Those are there because you're supposed to address them. You might find, you could put somebody on the case if you want to, and they could search through the list of prescribers and find out if there's 1 or 2 people that are the troublemakers here, but oftentimes we find it's the agent prescriptions that are the problem. Agent prescriptions are those prescriptions your staff sent to the pharmacy on your behalf. So the patient's already got the medication, right? But there's a resulting entry on the RX task queue for you to approve retroactively. And a lot of times people just forget about those. That bogs down your RX task queue. So it's not very fun, but you might want to take the time and look and see if that number is high. Take the time to go ahead and approve those. And that should improve your experience. Okay. Another popular question is about providers that have left your office. So we'll talk first about if somebody already has left and then what to do if you know someone will be leaving your practice. But if someone has left your office and you're still seeing a renewal request for that, you can fix this. It's a little bit complex. There's a whole Learn article that I've put the link to here. Give us a call on support. We're happy to walk you through this. Probably what happened is that you went in and disabled their EHR account or even their eRX account. Go in and take a look. If that's been disabled, but this box down here is still checked off, that's the problem. SureScripts does not pull from that. If that box is still checked, SureScripts still thinks you want the renewal requests even though they're gone, because you may truly want them. Maybe you agree that you would watch over any renewal requests coming in from that patient, eventually knowing that those are going to stop. But if it's problematic, you can turn those off. So you have to do some funny stuff like turn their account back on, uncheck that, save it, wait for it to sync. It's kind of, there's a lot of steps to it. So if this is ringing true to you, check out that Learn article for some steps or give us a call. Now, if you know someone's going to be leaving your office soon, what I would recommend before you get in this scenario is, if you don't want to see their renewal requests at all, is first uncheck that box and save it. Go have a cup of coffee and come back and then disable the account, because that gives it time to sync to SureScripts, and then you won't end up in that situation. Okay, this is a really easy one for support to help you with. If you don't want to see this message on the left-hand side where you have to enter a reason for discontinuing something every time, we can switch that. You might really like entering a discontinuation message every time. It depends. This is a practice-wide switch, so we can't have, if everybody's got a different opinion on it, you're going to have to pick one. But right now, the default is the one on the left, and you can switch it to the right where you do still have to approve the deletion, but you don't have to enter a reason or even a bogus reason just to get that window to close. Oh, we get lots of these ones. And the question really is, why can't I access eRX for this patient? And you get this message. Sometimes you'll see something very similar and it has like this 4022 number. You don't have to pay attention to that. If you get this message, we really mean it. Just call us. We can fix this. Likely the culprit here is that the patient was merged in your system. So, you have 2 partner accounts and probably 2 EHR accounts, right? And you've got visits from who knows how many years. And they all kind of mosh together, right? Depends on the dates of them. And when that happens, eRX it does a good job of matching the patient up, but sometimes there's an encounter there that gets a little goofy, and you might be trying to open eRX under an encounter for the patient that doesn't really exist anymore, that was merged. And so we can fix this pretty quickly and pretty easily. You're not bothering us, that's why I put our number there. Just give us a call, we can fix that up for you. Okay, checking the status of sent prescriptions. We know that you get a lot of calls from pharmacies. It seems like they didn't get the prescription or they want to know any number of things about the status of it. And I feel like people are drawn to looking at the status on the EHR side for whatever reason. And you go to the bottom of your encounter for that day, for that visit, and there's a little prescription section. And you might see the information that's in there. There is a little bit of a delay that we've noticed lately where it might still say it's pending even though it's truly been sent. And when we're looking into that, what I would recommend instead is that if you want to know the true status of the transmission information, head over into eRX and scroll down to the bottom or use the anchor buttons to jump to the bottom. If you hover over that little red section where it says eRX, it'll tell you real-time information about where that prescription's at. And so you'll see here that it's not only has been delivered, but SureScripts received a verification that the pharmacy has that. So that's like the true information that you can use to push back with the pharmacy that they've received it. I'm here to tell you one thing that you may not know about prescriptions when they get to the pharmacy side. It's a lot like your eLabs queue. Just because the prescription comes in doesn't mean it gets matched to the right patient. So just keep that in mind. It may be an error on their side that they've matched it to a similar patient, the wrong patient, who knows. They could have simply just hit the delete button too. So all those kind of things we can research with SureScripts. But the trick is we need to know about them within the first 10 business days. So if you're finding you're having issues with a specific pharmacy, they say they're not getting these, you see here that it's verified, just shoot us a note, but try to get us a recent example and we'll get that off to SureScripts. Sometimes you'll learn about some funny stuff and you're like, oh yeah, I just remember who that patient was, but it was like 3 months ago. And those are great examples for us to look into, but SureScripts, they don't really care. They only want to do stuff within the last 10 days. So just in case you didn't know, you can hover over this red eRX section right in eRX, and that'll show you the status of those prescriptions. This is the last one I want to cover for today, and hopefully this will be a little relevant with everything that's going on lately. And it has to do with telemedicine locations and prescribing. And I think PCC's stance on this is not necessarily to create a telemedicine location. It doesn't mean that you didn't. And so I think I'm certainly not suggesting that you go create a bunch of telemedicine locations for this purpose. I'm simply pointing out where if you have created a telemedicine location and you're having trouble prescribing from it, this is probably the issue. So you might remember a long time ago, I was talking about those SureScripts identifiers that they want for every provider and every location. Now, innocently, you may have created a telemedicine location in Partner. That's great. You're scheduling patients for it. That's fine. So you see in your patient's visit for today that it's attached to the telemedicine location. That's also fine. It's not fine if you don't have a SureScripts identifier for that location. And one of the ways you'll know that is if you look on the left-hand side here, you'll see your name and just probably your DEA number. You might not notice this. Normally that's populated with your address and your phone number. So kind of the shortness of it might trigger your eye a little bit. The other way you'll know is it just says print. SureScripts won't let you send stuff electronically without those identifiers. And likely what's happened is that your telemedicine location has not been added as a prescribing location in the EHR. And that's done in user admin. So if you have the ability to do that, or grab your office manager, whoever, they can go ahead and add that telehealth or telemedicine location to your profile. Again, go have a cup of coffee, let that sync over to eRX. If that still doesn't work, give us a call. Nat will be able to take a look and see if there's some kind of funny stuff going on with your account, and we'll get that fixed up. So depending on how you like to manage your telemedicine visits, if you've run into this, this is definitely the problem, and you can help yourself and your colleagues kind of get through that. So I think we've reached the point of time where I'd love to take some questions. And I think Jan's going to tell me all about what she's gathered from today's session. So thank you guys so much for listening to all that stuff.
You bet I will. You know, I have to say first that one of the lovely effects of getting everybody together to do UC sessions is that I get to see people I haven't seen in the office in forever. You guys don't understand. I sit right near Morgan. I used to hear those lilting tones all day, every day. I almost cried when she said, "Poor albuterol." I've missed you. But the questions are the thing. We do have a couple of questions. The very first one is related to sending multiple prescriptions, the multiple prescription feature.
Yeah.
How do pharmacies see the 3 dates?
Those should show up in 3 separate prescriptions as they do today.
Okay, because there is a bit of additional information. Does this get pushed out if the script is pushed out of the script if it's a long script? I love this, but it feels like pharmacies often tell us they can't see the fill date if it's not the current date.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, with the new 1,000 characters, I think maybe what's happening too is that you're exceeding the character limit unknowingly because it's all those 3 prescriptions at once. That's a really good question. We're going to have beta testers for this, and I'm sure they're going to be very eager to try that out. We can see part of that, I think, is a SureScripts conversation. SureScripts loves to call pharmacies. So I think if you're having trouble with pharmacies, you tell me, and I'll get SureScripts on that. But I think that they definitely, when I worked at Walgreens, it's a very easy, recognizable field that you should process 1 prescription and save 2 for the future on the patient's chart. But let us know if you are still having trouble with that.
And the second of the 2 questions that we've gotten so far is there a timeline for eRX in Pocket PCC?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know. I would say not this year. This release is going to take quite a bit of our time to get out. We really want to thoroughly test this because we don't want to push all these exciting changes out and then here be like, can't send out prescriptions. So yeah, that's a really great question. I think Paula has a session on the roadmap, I think next week.
Next Tuesday.
Speaking more to that. I know she's got that on her list of things that we definitely want to do. Indeed.
And that is all the questions that came in as of the time that we were gathering them. We've got somebody typing. So oh no, that was Nat sharing the handouts. I'm getting too anxious. I'm jumping the gun here. Yeah, so that is everything that we've got for today. There is no reason not to continue sharing questions in the live session. I know we're going to be watching the channels pretty closely, and we'll be able to get text answers out to you. And there is a hope that we'll be able to put up some sort of synopsis and maybe share Q&A across sessions sometime as a wrap up to the event as a whole. So thank you, Morgan. This is a ton of information, and I honestly, things have been moving so quickly here. I learned so much. I was lucky to be assigned. Yeah, I was lucky to be assigned to this session. There was plenty I needed to know. What you should know, Morgan, sooner than later, though, is that there was lots of excitement in the live session.
Oh, so good. I'll read them.
Yeah, please do check that out. People were pretty psyched about some of the stuff that you showed off. A reminder just that we'll post a link for the survey for this course as well. So if you would please share with us your ideas and reactions to the course and let us know what you liked and what might have been done differently or better, please do that. And we will see you next time. Tomorrow we have courses on reporting. That's what I was just going to. Tomorrow is Improve Your Practice's Health with PCC's Practice Vitals dashboard. That is at noon Eastern with Tim Proctor. Don't miss that. and return again at 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We will have a rerun of PCC June COVID-19 release. So Brian Kennedy's highlights and training session related to the features that'll be released in the next version of PCC EHR, the June COVID release. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, Morgan, very much for a
thank you, Jan.
super time. See you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.